Welcome to day 4 of the WSET Diploma Student Summit 2021. Today I'm speaking with Phoebe French, who was awarded the Louis Jadot Burgundy Prize for her performance in the Unit 3 exam, now the D3, Light Wines of the World. We hear her origin story and transition into her role in the wine trade. Talk about the gap between levels 3 and 4 at the WSET. She shares her broader reflections on her time studying the diploma, before linking this to her top recommendations and tips. She then reflects on 4 attendee questions, covering solo theory learning for D3, tips for studying theory and tasting and what didn't work for Phoebe, recommended order for theory and tasting in D4 and 5 exams, overcoming exam jitters, before sharing what she earned for winning the Louis Jadot Burgundy Prize. Enjoy.
Well, I guess I got into wine through food, really. I sort of come from a family where food is sort of very important. My mother's a fantastic cook, as is my grandma. And one of the things we used to do as a family, when there was a special occasion, we'd go to a really nice restaurant. And obviously going to nice restaurants, you get exposed to the wine side of things. So it was sort of learning on that side. I then left school and I went to cookery school in Ireland, which was amazing. But actually, while I was doing that, they also offered this wine course. And I just remember being fascinated by it and all the different branches and things that wine touches on. It's not just about the wine, it's the history, it's the science, all of that. And I just thought, yeah, this is something I'd really like to do. So I went to university. I started getting jobs sort of in my holidays in the drinks industry. I got my first sort of big break with Ellis Wines. They've got their own warehouse in sort of West London way. So you really get to see the whole operation. And that was sort of really getting my foot in the door a bit. So I sort of did a summer with them. And at university, I was working on food societies. Sort of 3 years in, I found out that my university actually had a wine tasting team, believe it or not. So I joined that, and that was incredible because that was when I was first exposed to the WSET, really, because we use that model for, when we're tasting and what you're smelling, what you're looking out for, sort of the acidity, tannin structure, and how you sort of differentiate wines, really. So that was amazing for me, and I got to compete in 3 different competitions, got exposed to wines that I'd never would have bought, never would have tried before. And that really set me off. And then I got a job while I was at university at a wine shop in town. So I was at St Andrews. So I got a job at Louvians, who are incredible. They've got this fantastic array of wine, spirits, beers, everything. And the manager, Archie, is incredibly generous. He'll open things. He really wants to get you passionate about it. And I guess when you're in retail, you really have to know your stuff, because somebody comes in and goes, "Oh, what's this?" And it looks a bit bad if you don't know the answer. So that really helped me. It gave me a lot of confidence. So I had sort of all of this going in, and then left university, had a brief stint in fine wine, and then I sort of, I guess you would call it, fall into my current job, which is at the drinks business. So we're sort of a daily news and sort of monthly print magazine. So I sort of started off with social media, and I've now gone up to deputy editor. It involves a lot more detail than, say, you'd come across in a day-to-day sort of scenario. But what I would say is it gives me a lot of confidence personally for, when I'm writing my stories, that I sort of basically know my stuff. It's a sort of, it helps going into that detail, that when you are speaking to, interviewing winemakers from all around the world, something comes up and you can sort of be right, yeah, I know what that is. And rather than it sort of completely flummoxing you and you frantically trying to sort of Google while you're speaking to them. So yeah, it gives you a nice bit of background, and just sort of helps you interact with them better. I'd say it's definitely given me confidence in my day job at the moment.
As I started advertising really that this summit is running, I've had quite a few people contacting me and saying, I'm studying level 3. Am I allowed to sign up? Will this be okay? And I think from my understanding that there is a sort of quite a big step up. And I'm just curious, for yourself, what was it that made you want to take that step from level 3 to level 4?
Yeah, I'd really enjoyed my level 3. I found sort of the way that was structured really interesting. I thought it covered a lot. So I felt that I was sort of had quite a good foundation when I did that. And I guess sort of the diploma was sort of a natural step for me. Something I've enjoyed, and just to gain extra confidence really and knowledge. That's something I never want to be in a stage where I'm sort of complacent about my knowledge. I always want to be learning more. So yeah, the diploma for me was a big one. And as you say, there is quite a step up. For me, it was the structure that was quite different, because in level 3, you get set a bit of reading, read this chapter, come back, let's talk about that, let's do a bit of tasting. The diploma is just because there's so much more to learn. It becomes slightly different, and you sort of, a lot of it's on you basically, rather than the teacher. So, and the classes. So yeah, there's a lot of that. But I think as long as you know that going in, you know that it's going to take extra time, you know that you're going to have to put more in, and you're sort of realistic about, have I got the time to achieve that? Then yeah, I'd say definitely go for it.
Transition made, decision made, and now successfully completed. So I think, I would just really, invite you now to kind of reflect back on the diploma and kind of, what comes to mind when you think back on the experience.
I think the first thing that would come to mind was that it was really hard. I've done, a lot of quite tricky exams in my time, and this was challenging. And I think you don't realize, for quite a lot of that time I was a student, so that was literally all I was doing. Whereas now, having a full-time job, it's even one such as mine that's in the industry, it's not the same thing as actually getting down, studying it in all this detail. You don't cover what you cover in the diploma really in a day-to-day thing. It's for your reference later on. So I think that, having that in mind was important for me. But then, you get a lot out of it. You get to meet some great people from all areas of the wine trade. Some people, even the bonkers people that are doing this for fun, and they're, putting that amount of time into it. So it's great. You meet a great bunch of people. And I sort of was in a group that formed like a tasting groups early on, and that's really sort of helpful. And you get to sort of, it's sort of, you bounce off each other really. So I really enjoyed that. So I think and as I say, it gave me a lot of confidence in my job. So I think I've just done my big, huge unit. It's called Unit 3. I think it's now D3. I, just after doing that, I was popped off on a 18-day solo press trip to South America, to Argentina and Chile, which was incredibly full on. I met sort of over 80 different wineries and producers, and it was, just you and them the entire time. And I guess having done all that work and having that sort of background really helped me, because you're trying to think of sort of different questions for each person, and it's like, well, right, I know that, so I can sort of draw on those facts and ask them about that, and I know the trends for that. So that was very, very helpful for me.
As you know, I'm interviewing the prize-winning WSET Diploma graduates, and you're certainly among them, and did and received your award for the Unit 3 Light Wines of the World, as it was then called, and received the Louis Jadot Burgundy Prize. So very well done. I would just ask you to then reflect on that prize-winning performance, really. Was it a surprise that you did so well? What do you think it may have been that you did so well to get the best marks? And if you can potentially share as many specifics as possible around exam technique, I'm sure that would be great for the listener.
Sure. Yeah, it was a lovely surprise, really. I think we were all finding that exam a real, well, I think everyone calls it a beast because it really is. It's huge, like the scope of it is enormous. And yeah, when I did it, obviously, as I was saying to you before, that there wasn't a textbook. So it was sort of very much like sort of in the dark a bit. But it was a really lovely surprise. I worked very hard for it, but it was still amazing. Considering, I think, because we all did it one day. I think that's changed. It's over 2 days now. But I was absolutely shattered after my exam, to be honest with you. And I sort of had one of those awful moments when you're in your sort of tasting exam. And I think so red wine flights, and I was sort of smelling, and I was getting too caught up on trying to figure out what it was, which you shouldn't do. You should just get something on the page. And then you suddenly look at the clock, you're like, oh no. And then I sort of had to give myself a talking to. I think, right, just get something on the page, just get it down, and then it's fine. Because actually, they're not testing you on working out really what it is. It's the classic sort of maths exam thing of showing your working. So, and then I actually ended up doing really well on that question. Don't quite know how, but that just shows you can do it, really. You often think you can't. But then I just sort of, how I sort of studied, it was obviously slightly different, but I'll go through what I did. I used sort of my commuting time. Obviously, we're not really having that at the moment, and also my lunch breaks. And I found that sort of short, sharp, sort of intense revision on like a little topic, say, right, I'm going to, between this meeting, or for 20 minutes, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to look at that. And I think that really focuses your mind to actually absorbing the information rather than sitting there for an hour and going, right, okay, let's get through this. And that really doesn't work for me. I think short, sharp things and using time that's sort of dead time really works for me. I guess sort of giving yourself enough time to actually learn it all is really important. They massively drum it into you at the school, like you need to leave, 4 or 5 months or something to get this in. And you do sort of need that time. I probably didn't leave quite enough time myself, but sometimes you need a little bit of pressure as well, right? I've got to get this done. And setting yourself deadlines of, I need to cover this by this by this. That really helps. Otherwise, it's this massive, huge lot of information that you're thinking, okay, right, I've got to get this through this. So breaking it up really, really works. I don't know, it'll be a bit different because the most important, I think, piece of exam sort of technique I was given was that they said to me, you can basically pass your Unit 3 by sort of having a really good knowledge of your Level 3, so the previous exam and that textbook. So that was quite interesting. So basically what I did is I used that textbook as like the base of what I revised from, and then I sort of added to it. So I added just bits and pieces that I found from my reading. And let's see if I can open it for you, but I've got, so if I just flick through, they've all got like Post-its. So I just stuck it everywhere. I guess you could do it the other way around with what now you've got a textbook. I guess you could just make sure you know the stuff in Level 3 and basically go in and add that in, because knowing the basics and having that properly structured and written down in that sort of format is really helpful. So I guess I could suggest to do that. And I guess it's otherwise it's sort of the tastings and that sort of thing. Like I think I pretty much went to every single class that we had. I know some people sort of skip them and pick the ones that they think are most useful. I would say that because I did mine through evening classes, so it was literally like a 2-hour session, sort of between 6 and 8. And when you're doing it in that format, it's not really about going through the theory for me and for sort of everyone. It's about doing the tasting practice and getting the sort of exam technique sort of nuggets, basically. So that really helps you with the, otherwise you're going, that's sort of what you're paying for. Otherwise you're going and buying in the wines yourself or trying to find the time to go to tastings. So I definitely would use that. And then I guess the tastings, obviously, it's not a great time at the moment for doing that practice. But when they do start going, or when there's more sort of virtual events going, I'd sort of just be quite selective about what you do. So my job, you'd think I would be constantly at tastings, but I'm actually not. I'm in front of my computer. So it's about sort of looking, right, what do I struggle with, or what do I want to taste more, and then sort of getting the, because normally with these trade tastings you get sent, a program of what's there, and just really picking up bits that you want to do and being organised about it. Because I'm not one of those people. Some people are, that they can go around a tasting and literally do like 100 wines and get these great tasting notes. My mouth is about dead after about 30. So. I think it's sort of about doing that. And with that in mind, the WSET offer some good events, actually. So I did one on Madeira just before my fortified exam. I don't drink a lot of Madeira, actually. That's convinced me to drink more of it. But it's things that you don't come into contact with a lot, which is quite a good idea to do like a special focus on. And I know there are loads of companies doing online sort of events now, so I definitely would get in touch with them. If you have a friend that's working for one of these companies that's sending out the little miniature bottles of things, that's really good. I also found, I mentioned that a group of us did like tasting groups. That's really handy, bit challenging at the moment, but if there's any way you could do that, and buying, you do this in class, you get given the sort of the basic and then the best wines and the ones in between. But I'd really recommend, tasting more sort of supermarket wines and sort of bigger brands that you come into contact with a lot. Because chances are, if you're taking the diploma, you're a type of wine consumer that isn't sort of the average one. You're going to probably be drinking wines that are a lot more expensive than what the majority of people actually drink. So actually going back and tasting those wines and seeing how they compare with others and the differences that you can pick out, and whether you can distinguish that they're simple or, or actually there's some sort of surprises, that's like a really good way of just calibrating your palate, really. And they're available in quite often these tiny little single serve bottles. So that sort of saves the bank as well. So those are sort of my top things that I could think of that I did that might be helpful now.
What's also very interesting for me is to see where the same tips keep coming up. And you're now the second person that's said, don't overlook the supermarket, because you've got all the archetypal examples there. You've got the, many New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs to choose from, and lots of Chardonnays, and lots, some New World. You'll have Chile. I think it's arguably the best time ever to be going and buying wine in a supermarket, and certainly one that's got a decent wine selection. And, find one in an area where they might have a slightly enlarged cellar. That can sort of go a long way. I think this is a perfect time to segue across into some of the attendee questions that they've sent over in advance. And I think the first one is really specifically for the D3. And it's somebody who's asking their theory learning now, basically, I believe, for the May 2021 exam. So obviously at home, and they're having a bit of a challenge deciding how to sort of learn for the exam, saying the amount of knowledge is huge, and like remembering everything seems overwhelming. To me, your tip there about, breaking it down and doing kind of a bit at a time seems like fantastic advice. I'm just wondering if beyond that, around organization, is there anything that sort of comes to mind that you did that you think served you well?
Yeah, well, certainly the level 3 sort of textbook actually structures it quite well, so you can almost follow the guidance there. And certainly I completely understand that feeling of going, oh my goodness, there's so much to do, because I think when you first sort of sit down and look at it, there is a lot. I did sort of find, I'm not sure whether it's the same still, but the weighting was very much on the old world still. There was sort of a lot more sort of still that expected to learn and go into more detail than say you would with other sort of more new world countries. So that's sort of one to bear in mind sometimes, that, if you're sort of like still on France for ages, then just don't worry. It's that is a slightly bigger section than the others. So yeah, I'd sort of just break it down. I think the book is structured such that there are certain categories that you learn for each country that you study. So I'd sort of break it down like that. And I just sort of basically, created a page for each country and literally went through, did those sort of bullet point by bullet point on those specific categories, and basically put everything onto a page and then just condensed it down. And you'll do that sort of over the months gradually as you keep on sort of going back to it. But just sort of keep at it, because it will seem a lot, and it is a lot, but it will start going in eventually. I think I think just sort of persevere. Even before the exam, I was like, oh my goodness, they could just ask me absolutely anything. But you've always got to have in your mind, what could they ask me? I always got told you've got to play the game, which is kind of true. You've got to sort of think, how are they going to phrase this? Is this something that I actually necessarily need to know? Or, and just try and think how they would think. Obviously there's a bit of danger in that, but I think, they're not really trying to trip you up. It's going to be something that is quite general, that you can bring in other bits too.
Another question, which I think is probably suited to the D3 also, is the question is, they'd be very interested to know what you felt was the most valuable way to study theory and tasting, and what in hindsight perhaps you wouldn't have done. So I think getting into that slightly more into that conversation around, okay, what are the more structured things perhaps that you did with tasting that you think, this is something that served you well?
I guess sort of not getting too caught up in all the details. I think it's so important when you taste. You don't have really that much time, and you've got to get all the information down. So I think just getting used to doing it quickly. Sometimes that actually is sort of the disadvantage of doing it in a wine tasting group, because you're all very excited and sort of just like to share all of these details, and then you realize that you've been talking about a wine for half an hour, and just one wine, and you don't have that time. So I think it's just getting into the discipline of being fast, and just getting the main points down, rather than sort of like in your head just going over, right, what's this, what's that, that kind of thing, certainly for the tasting. I'd say, theory.
Sorry, may I just ask a follow-up question there? Just curious, what was the sort of structure that you kind of had in mind I guess during the exam, and the kind of the shape of the vessel you were putting all that knowledge into?
Well, I guess how I sort of taste, I'd sort of, I always tend to go, if I've got like a flight, I always smell all of them before I write anything down. But it's just sort of like, I find that sort of gets your nose smelling normally. Sometimes if you just assess one and then you go and do another, you're like, oh, that smells weird. So it helps me to go and do all three. And then, you're obviously just the main bits. So, you've got to get down the aromas, you've got to get down the flavours that you can smell. And obviously they always say, what you smell on the nose, put straight down for the palate. And you can get that ticked off really quickly. So sort of basically not to worry about that too much. And then you've obviously then got the specialist questions, and you'll know, you might have wines from the same grape variety, or the same country and that kind of thing. But I'd recommend not thinking about that first, just getting the basic things down and then thinking about it, rather than it all going round in your head at the same time. And then you actually realizing, oh God, I've not got anything on the page because I did that. It's not nice. So I think just being quite methodical about how you do it and ticking off all those points, they'll give you, how to answer that question, and the sorts of other questions, that follow-up questions that you'll get after writing down the basic tasting notes. But to focus on those after you've done the main bits, because then you'll have everything written down and you can go through, but right, okay, that had that in common, that had that in common, and you can start sort of pairing it up. But that would be my main tips there.
And did you come across the idea of sort of doing a mock blind exam, kind of solo against exam conditions and against the clock?
I did a bit of that. I found it probably more helpful for doing mock questions for the theory, or rather, even if I wasn't actually doing the mock questions, I'd plan them, because that's quite a good way, certainly if because I know you were asking for the January students, that's a really good way, in the lead up to it, sort of figuring out what you actually know and what you need a little bit more sort of reading on. So certainly there was when I did it, there was a whole list of sort of possible questions, and then you've got all the past papers online too. So you can literally just go through them and just plan what you would write. And then if you're thinking, actually, I don't know whether I would be very good at this, then you can note that down and think, right, I'll add that to my list. If there's ones that you're like, right, I would love this question to come up, then you sort of know that's something that you're okay on. So it's quite a good way of determining what you need more work on, basically.
I got to say, I think that's absolutely brilliant advice. I wish that's advice I wish I'd had when I was at university, because you can spend all this time doing the mock exams and doing sample questions, but at the end of the day, as long as you don't forget how to write in the exam, you'll be okay, as long as you know what you're going to write. I'm not sure if you just do it that way around, you can actually test yourself on many more things, because you're not
exactly
write out this gorgeous prose in lovely handwriting. It's just
didn't have the time. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. And I think it kind of does flow on from there, and there may not be anything, but it just is there anything in hindsight that you kind of think, if I did it again, it's not going to happen, but if you did it, I wouldn't do that at all. I thought it was going to be really helpful. Everyone said it was going to be a huge help, but in the end, I did it and it didn't work for me.
Yes, it's sort of, I guess, everything helped to an extent, more or less. I guess sometimes you find yourself, although it's great for you sort of look something up, like, right, that didn't really make any sense there. And then you sort of find yourself on 30 minutes later going down a whole rabbit warren of information that you don't really need to know, but you've sort of spent a load of time sort of researching. So I think, stay on topic, stay looking at what you actually need to learn, because you've got a lot to learn. And if you start going into too much detail on one topic, then that will push the amount of time that you have for the others. But then obviously, as I say, bear in mind the weighting of the qualification. If there is more information on the old world, and if you are expected to know more of that in detail, then spend more time on that. Unfortunately, that is the way. I mean, you could argue that there's a lot of information about, loads of New World countries that you probably should and need to know in more detail, but you've got to look at what you're provided with and what's in front of you. And I think one thing I would say is really useful is bring in the sort of visual element. So I just went in and got loads of maps of all the different wine regions. Wine Folly does some great maps and all of that. So you've got that in front of you. Can you sort of visualize if you're not really confident about where these wine regions are in a country? That's a really good way of being like, right, okay, it's up there, that's next to that, and that kind of thing. Because otherwise, if you're just looking at text the whole time, it's quite hard to sort of make it relevant in your mind. So that helped me.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. No, you're on a roll now. You're on a roll. Yeah. Lots of talk of making it visual, and yeah, this is all really, really good stuff. So really just give me the last couple of questions really that people sent in. Mm-hmm. So the next question that was sent over was for D4 sparkling and D5, the fortified exam. Would you recommend attempting the tasting or the theory part first, and why?
I guess it is, to be honest, it will come to you on the day. Some people might, if I have something to drink, I probably won't be sort of sharp enough. But I actually find that the tasting does require quite a bit of concentration in itself, to be honest. Practically, in my head, we did it too. We came and did the tasting, then went away and did the theory. But if you're not doing that, practically, it might be a good idea to do the tasting first, so you get all of the stuff out of the way, and you're not sort of spilling it all over your all over your table. But yeah, I'd say that was. I can't remember how I did it. That's really bad.
And to be fair, I think don't overlook that practical element.
Yeah.
Like just, you literally have a table, don't you? You have a limited space. And
if you're sitting, it's not going to massively affect you. And, Remedy's got alcohol in it anyway. And it's a relaxant. So it might actually help settle you.
This is it. Yeah. You'll just open up parts of your brain you never knew existed.
Exactly.
Okay, and the final question that we've had sent in is, the big thing I would love to learn from your guests is how they overcame exam jitters and what they did the night before and day of the exam.
I guess sort of giving yourself quite a stern internal sort of talking to is helps. I mean, I've always struggled with exams. Like I do get nervous. I've done lots and it doesn't seem to ever sort of completely disperse. But in many ways, that's good. It gives you the sort of adrenaline to get through it. And these are long exams, so you do need a bit of to get through. I'd certainly with my theory, I was just sort of basically reviewing my notes on the night before and on the day, just so it was fresh in my head. You see loads of people just sort of like cramming sort of on the day. And I think you've got to be careful. It's good to have it a little bit in your head. You don't want you don't want to be so overwhelmed by the time you get in there that it's sort of almost tired. You've got to be, as much as you can, try and sort of put it to the back of your mind, try and get a good night's sleep. Try not to sort of let it get to you, and just basically think, in this number of hours, it will be over. And just, as I've always been told, read the question, like read it, take highlighters in with you, highlight it, because your mind will be playing tricks on you and you'll think something says one thing and it doesn't. So just make sure you just sort of settle yourself down. It's intimidating when you're walking into that room with desks sort of in rows, and it can give sort of people flashbacks of their sort of school and university experience. But you know what's coming. You know that it's there, and you've just got to think, right, it'll be over soon.
I like it. It's for me that answer is all about perspective, isn't it? It's like it might feel like it's going on forever, but it's 3 hours. It's like there is light at the end of the tunnel, and
there is.
We're very nearly there. Thank you so much. It's great. I'm purposely asking the same questions to all of the guests, and you're all bringing out different ideas and different answers, which is fantastic, and I'm sure it's going to really help a lot of people. As we sort of move towards closing now, I do want to kind of, I guess, reflect on one of the things that stood out for me about you, which was your prize-winning performance. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sharing something about what it is the prize that you won for your performance, and talk to us about, when you expect to be able to take that.
Sure. So I got the Louis Jadot Burgundy Prize. So that's for my Unit 3 or D3. And that involves, I got a lovely sort of decanter which has my name on it, and I also have got a study trip to Burgundy to go out and see to see what they do there. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to take it yet, but hopefully, if the regulations allow and the vaccine fairy comes and clears up all this mess, then I will be taking it hopefully later on this year, maybe sort of towards the end of summer. I think that was when they recommended going, and just sort of seeing, obviously the vines will all be looking very leafy and healthy at that time, and they'll be sort of thinking about harvest and everything. So that's my plan, hopefully.
So something to look forward to. Hopefully, 2021 is your year.
That is my year.
Really, just throw the door open to say anything else about your current position, and by all means, feel free to share social media or websites where people can sort of connect with you or read more of what you're writing.
Yeah. So I'm currently deputy editor of the Drinks Business. So you'll see me writing articles, sort of daily news articles really online. And then I also contribute to the monthly magazine, which goes and sent out to the drinks trade. I also edit a sort of London restaurant wine guide called Wines Confidential, which was published at the end of last year. It was quite an interesting one, because obviously the poor hospitality trade has had a nightmare of a year, so it was quite hard finding a way to sort of publish it. But I think hopefully that's seen as a positive thing. We try to include some success stories of how people have actually been very inventive and have got round a lot of the issues that they've been faced with. So that is a positive. On thedrinksbusiness.com is where I am at.
Thank you so much, Phoebe, for sharing your valuable insight. I think this is the real value of a summit like this, as we start to see repetition of advice from award-winning students. So hopefully already you've found some tried and tested advice has helped you. If you're watching on the Summit webpage, do see below for the timestamps that will let you navigate to any part of the episode. And if you're listening on your podcast player and would like full access to the Summit materials, please visit interpretingwine.com/summit today. If you know someone who would find this episode useful, do please share the direct link, interpretingwine.com/441. And if you found it really useful, then please leave the episode an iTunes review on the same link. Next time on the WSET Diploma Student Summit, we are already at the end of the summit. But we go out in style as I speak with Mary Wright, a double award winner, with both awards coming for the Unit 3 D3. See you then.